In Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, pretty much every deck is going to need an extra deck full of staple monsters, but a lot of the best extra deck staples are of very high rarity and kind of hard to craft. And while you're waiting to craft all the highest rarity extra deck monsters, these are some good ones you can use to fill up your extra deck, which might actually be useful, and some of them might even be used after you get all your high rarity staples. And at number 10, we have Super Quantal Mech Beast Grampulse. This is a rank 3 monster, so only really useful if you play level 3 monsters and are going into Xyz monsters. But it has a pretty decent effect where you can just detach one of its materials to destroy one spell or trap card on the field. And Super Quantal Beast Mech Grampulse is only of the rare quality. Now, Nightmare Phoenix is one of the most played Link monsters in the game, precisely because it just has the ability to destroy one spell or trap card in the field. And that card requires you to discard a card from your hand in order to use its effect. So, if you have the ability to go into a rank 3 monster, Super Quantal Mech Beast Grampulse is kind of like a cheaper version of Nightmare Phoenix, just without all the versatility of Nightmare Phoenix, but can be used in pretty much any deck. Grampulse also has some other effects which are only really relevant within its archetype, and we're only talking about the card for its generic use. Which I should probably mention one other thing here. The card cannot attack unless it has Xyz materials, so it does have a downside, but generally this card doesn't survive that long anyway, and it's useful even if you're only able to use the effect a single time. And at number 9, we have number 49 Fortune Tune. This is another rare quality Xyz monster. In fact, most of these cards in this list are rare quality, with only 2 of them being normal quality, so I'll stop mentioning that for the other spots on this list right here, and just focus on their effects since it's just as easy to get rare quality cards as it is normal quality. And what Fortune Tune does is, it's a rank 3 monster with generic materials just like the previous card, and has the passive effect where it cannot be targeted by card effects. And also, if this card would be destroyed by battle or a card effect, you can detach one of its materials instead. So when this card hits the field, it stays on the field for a while because it's kind of hard to get rid of, with being fully target immune and having 2 materials baseline in order to detach to save itself from 2 battles or non-targeting destruction effects. Although, it does have very low defense at only 900, so chances are it will be destroyed by battle eventually. Additionally, during your standby phase, you get to gain 500 life points if it's on your side of the field. And if this card is finally sent from the field to the graveyard, you can target 2 level 3 monsters in your graveyard, shuffle both of them into the deck in order to return this card to your extra deck. Now, normally this effect is not why people play this card, but it definitely gives some benefits if you go into the grind game, because you can constantly reset Fortune Tune back into the deck, while also giving you 2 of your resources back into your main deck, if you're playing a deck that wants to search them out later a lot or something. Fortune Tune is one of the few cards in this list that actually sees competitive play in just normal decks, and isn't replaced by higher rarity cards later. And at number 8, we have number 52 Diamond Crab King. This is a rank 4 monster with generic materials, i.e. 2 level 4 monsters of any kind, and simply has the effect where you can detach one of its materials in order to set its attack to 3000 and change its defense to 0, which basically swaps its attack and defense. This will last until the end of the turn, and if this card attacks, it's changed to defense position at the end of the battle phase. And it also has a negative effect where if this card is attacked, it's changed to attack position at the end of the damage step if it doesn't have any Xyz materials. Now before this video, I didn't even know it had that negative effect because I've never actually seen it last that long. Generally, what this card is used for is to come out on the field and have a 3000 attack beat stick with only 2 level 4 monsters. That way you can swing for game with 3000 points of damage, or attack over one of your opponent's monsters. And it was really good back in the day when that kind of mattered for getting rid of towers. But nowadays we have cards like Utopia the Lightning or Utopia Double, which are able to beat for more damage and have the same materials as Diamond Crab King. However, both of those cards are of much higher rarities. So Diamond Crab King definitely serves its purpose as being the beat stick for low rarity rank 4 Xyz monsters, and is useful even if there are more useful cards that you can replace it with later. And at number 7, we have number 70 Malevolent Sin. I'm sure a lot of Duel Links players recognize this card as it's the most played rank 4 monster in the game over there. But in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, it's actually of only normal rare quality, the lowest quality in the game, which is kind of hilarious because the card is actually pretty decent. The card has generic materials just like the previous spot, and has the effect where you can detach one of its materials in order to banish one of your opponent's monsters until the next standby phase. And if this card attacks, at the end of the damage step it gains 300 attack and increases its rank by 3, which is a permanent increase. So the more this thing attacks, the stronger and stronger it gets, where after its first attack it will end its turn at 2700 attack. so it has a pretty decent stat line for a monster that's able to temporarily get rid of one of your opponent's cards for a turn, or just remove their last card in the field so that you can attack for a game. There's also lots of cards you can bring up on top of it later with its increased rank, but for the most part you can just ignore that because the card is good by itself. Or if you want some more Duel Links tech, Digital Bug Corbage is also of the rare quality Master Duel, so that could be an option to rank up on top of Malevolent Sin immediately in order to spin one of your opponent's defense position monsters. And at number 6, we have Proxy Dragon. For the first 4 spots of this list, I just went over a couple of Xyz monsters of 2 of the more popular ranks in the game, but for the rest of this list we're going to go over Link monsters, which are a lot more generic and useful in more decks. And Proxy Dragon is definitely generic, as it's a Link 2 monster with just any 2 monsters as its materials, which means it's an excellent card to use as a Link climbing tool if you're trying to convert tokens into effect monsters, as a lot of Link monsters have clauses where they need an effect monster specifically as one of their materials. And the effect of Proxy Dragon is, if any card you control on your side of the field will be destroyed by a card effect, you can destroy one monster this card points to instead. And this means your spell or trap cards too. So if you have something like a field spell that you really want to protect, you can have Proxy Dragon just point to a monster for some added protection. It also protects multiple cards, so if your opponent tries to Harpy's Feather Duster your back row, Proxy Dragon can be used in order to stop the effect. However, it can't be used to stop all of your monsters from being destroyed, since it can't destroy a monster to prevent the destruction of your monsters if that monster is going to be destroyed as well. And also, it can't really be used as a combo starter since its arrows only point left and right. So you need to have another Link monster on the field that allows it to be in the main monster zone before its effect can be live in the first place so that it can start protecting your cards. However, the best use of this card is just as a Link climbing tool to technically have an effect monster, and it's better than not having a generic Link 2 monster go into, which situationally has a useful effect. And at number 5, we have Steel Star Regulator. This is a Link 3 monster which requires any 3 non-Link monsters as materials, which does mean you can use tokens to bring it out. And it has the effect where it gains extra attack equal to the combined original levels / ranks of the monsters used for its Link summon times 100, which it kind of needs because it only has 1000 attack baseline. Then it has the activatable effect on the field where once per turn you can target one non-Link monster your opponent controls that has an attack less than or equal to this card's attack, where you can then destroy that card and then inflict damage to your opponent equal to half that monster's attack if one of the monsters used as this card's Link materials was an Xyz monster. Either way you get to destroy a monster. The only benefit you get for specifically using an Xyz monster is just doing a little bit of extra burn damage. So basically with Steel Star Regulator, you have a card which can destroy a monster and potentially have a very high attack power value if for whatever reason you use a whole bunch of really high level monsters to bring it out. However, there's generally better uses of 3 monsters to go into a Link monster. So, it's not the best thing in the world, but does give you emergency monster destruction if you really need it in low rarity. And is a nice option to just have being in your extra deck, rather than not having the option to have a monster destruction effect, if you can't get a higher rarity monster to do something better. And at number 4, we have Puzzlomino the Drop-In Deleter. This is a Link 2 monster whose materials are just any 2 monsters with different levels. And this card has the effect to basically destroy one of your opponent's monsters, but only if you're able to fulfill the conditions where you special summon a monster face up to a zone this card points to, then you have the option to change that monsters from levels 1 to 8, where you choose the same level as the monster your opponent controls that you want to destroy, because it has another effect where you can target 2 monsters in the field that have the same level, one from each player's side of the field, in order to destroy both of those targets. And you can only use each of its effects once per turn. So, Puzzlomino is just another extra monster which gives you the option to maybe destroy a monster on the field, just like the previous spot on this list. Although it might be easier to use than the previous spot depending on what kind of deck you're playing, but both of them basically require 3 monsters to have a monster destruction effect anyway, as you have to destroy one of your monsters in order to destroy one of your opponents. And only if that monster is below level 8, which means it has to have a level in the first place. So no Xyz or Link monster destructions. Now, again, not the best destruction effect in the game, but it is a destruction effect on an extra deck monster that most decks can go into pretty easily, and it only requires 2 monsters to start the whole thing up. It could also just allow you to manipulate the level of one monster that you special summon to a zone it points to, which could be used for something else if you don't want to use it to destroy cards. And at number 3, we have Codebreaker Virus Swordsman. This is a Link 2 monster with 2300 attack, which is kind of high for a Link 2 monster as they don't usually go above 2000. And it has some extra effects of its special summon while it's co-linked, but the main reason to use this card is because of its other effect where, if this card is destroyed by your opponent, you get to special summon it from your graveyard during the end phase, but then banish it when it leaves the field. So you can turn 2 monsters into a 2300 attack beatstick, who's able to float back if it's destroyed by your opponent, which is just some nice longevity on a card. It's probably not as useful as being able to destroy one of your opponent's cards as a link monster, but it is pretty easy to bring out as it only requires 2 effect monsters. It does have a downward pointing arrow which can be useful for link plays, and it has an extra effect that allows you to special summon a specific card from your deck if it's co-linked, which is an option to climb in link 3 or higher monsters if you want to play a Garnet. More importantly, it floats and can stay around for a little bit, and a lot of effects in the modern metagame do destroy cards by card effects, so you can expect the floating effect to be live more often than not. And you don't have to jump through hoops in order to use its effect, it just comes back if it's destroyed during the end phase and has a decent sized body at 2300 attack. And at number 2, we have Cross Sheep. This is a Link 2 monster which just requires 2 monsters with different names, so one of the easiest type of Link 2 monsters to go into. And it has an effect where, if a monster is special summoned to one of the zones this card points to, you get to apply one of its 4 effects based on the type of monster that's summoned there. Where if you summoned a ritual monster to the zone, you get to draw 2 cards, then discard 2. A fusion monster allows you to special summon a level 4 or lower monster from your graveyard. A synchro monster will gain all of your monsters 700 attack permanently. And an Xyz monster will make all of your opponent's monsters lose 700 attack permanently. Now, Cross Sheep is actually played quite a bit because its fusion effect is really easy to activate in a lot of different kinds of decks. And it's just a straight +1 in card advantage being able to special summon any level 4 or lower monster from your graveyard, and is a great extension tool. So if you use something like Instant Fusion to just cheat out a fusion monster to a zone that Cross Sheep is pointing to, you then get another monster from your graveyard, and then you can go into a Link 4 monster with all the monsters on field. And since Cross Sheep is one of the few cards on this list that's just used normally in the meta, it's obviously going to get a high spot on this list, even if it's not as generic as some of the ones I've talked about previously. And at number 1, we have Power Code Talker. This is a Link 3 monster which just requires any 3 monsters as its materials, which is a distinction that matters because a lot of good Link 3 monsters allow you to use 2+ monsters as materials, where generally Link 3 monsters that require exactly 3 are not as good in comparison. However, Power Code Talker does have a good effect where it's kind of worth going into, because its first effect is, once per turn you can just negate the effects of a monster on the field until the end of the turn. Additionally, it has another effect which is admittedly not as good but still somewhat useful, where once per turn if this card battles an opponent's monster, you contribute 1 monster this card points to in order to double this monster's attack. So this allows Power Code Talker to attack over anything with less than 4600 attack, which is a vast majority of monsters in the game. But you do have to tribute one of your monsters to do it, which is kind of a strict requirement for just doubling the monster of the attack for a short while, especially since the card already requires exactly 3 monsters to come out in the first place. Although the unconditional monster negate once per turn is pretty good, to the point where the card is actually played in just normal meta decks, and happens to be generic and is usable in pretty much any deck too, because even though it requires 3 monsters, those 3 monsters can be of any type, including tokens. And also, Power Code Talker is only of a normal rarity card, like number 70 Malevolent Sin, which definitely makes Power Code Talker one of the best of the normal rarity cards, and also one of the better generic extract monsters of just the low rarity distinction. Alright, and that's the list. There's not too many good extra deck generic monsters in the low rarities, although there are a couple of others that are a lot more specific to archetypes or types of monsters, so it's always worth looking through what's available if you're trying to fill your extra deck. So if you have any ideas for future videos similar to this one, preferably Master Duel related, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments.